So let me just welcome you, first of all, Dr. Charlie Hall, Texas A&M University, holder of the Ellison Chair in International Floriculture, and I'm delighted to welcome you to today's webinar. I conduct these series of webinars over time because of the affiliation and the partnership that I have with the Texas Nursery and Landscape Association, and James is online as a panelist, and James, thanks for all the support and sending the news blast out about the webinar, and we got folks rolling in as we speak, and so again, it's a great partnership we have with TNLA, and Brent, this is the 6th year in which you've been doing these exciting new plants coming down the pipeline webinars. That's pretty amazing. 6 years.
I didn't realize it had been that many years.
Yeah. And that's a testament to a lot of new plants that you've helped introduce into the market. So good job there. Good morning, Lee, Denton County Master Gardener checking in. See, I wanted to mention to folks that I do monitor the chat box. So as you're coming in, and if you have a question for Brent during his webinar, please do so in the chat box. Now I know there's a Q&A box too, but I don't monitor the Q&A box as closely as I do the chat box. See, there's no questions or anything in Q&A right now. So if you would, don't even put any questions in the Q&A box. Put all those questions over in the chat box. So you should have a chat button down at the bottom of your screen like I do, and click that chat box and go ahead and type in your question there. And if it pertains to a plant that Brent is talking about, I'll interrupt and say, I'll ask Brent that question, all right? So the Zoom interface ought to be pretty familiar with most folks by now. Since COVID, it has forced a new style of learning upon all of us, and a lot of us become Zoom experts. I used to do this meeting and go to webinar, but this is the first of these webinars that I've had the privilege of doing it in Zoom. So it's a little different interface, but it's all good. So again, I welcome you. Brent, thank you very much for doing this. As I know, this is a little different timing than what we've normally had in the past. It's a little later in the year. Usually you're doing it right after you come back from cast, and you have a chance to go sort through all your pictures and all the things, all your notes and everything. But, this year cast was a little different critter. And again, all because of COVID. So folks, let me introduce Brent to you real quick. Dr. Brent Pemberton, he's based out of the Overton Research and Extension Center. Brent has been, I think you've been on board since 1983, right? Am I remembering right? 1982. And that was 6 years before me, and I've been here 31 years. So the math tells me you're a 37-year veteran.
There you go.
Congratulations on that. And not only is Brent a research faculty within the Department of Horticultural Sciences here at Texas A&M, but he's a Texas A&M Regents Fellow. And they don't necessarily hand out that designation to just anyone. That designation is reserved for people who have made a contribution above and beyond to the citizens in the state of Texas and had a lasting influence on the industries in which they serve. So that can either be an extension position or a research position. And so Brent carries that particular moniker, and we're very proud of his reputation, not only within the university, but of course, throughout the state and throughout the region and indeed the country. So Brent, I'm just delighted for the 6th time to introduce you, and I appreciate your willingness to do this, and I'll turn the floor over to you.
All right. Well, Charlie, thank you very much for the introduction. That was very nice. And I didn't realize it had been that many years, but this year has been a little bit different, as you say. And so this year, instead of being able to talk about the things that I saw at spring trials, we're going to be talking about what we've had in our trials in the field and containers, et cetera, this summer. And so hopefully this will be kind of an early bird shot at what's going on here. We started doing this a couple of years ago so that the participants in the trials, the companies that participate in the trials, could get some information that they can use, as they develop, sales and marketing through the fall. And so we do these early bird results, which we'll be able to find on the website within the next few days. And then we'll also be continuing into September with some more rounds of data and that sort of thing, and we will include those at a later date and update that on the website. But anyway, this is the early bird results, and I just wanted to show you some pictures of how things have been going this summer. We'll start out in the field, and this will be roughly in alphabetical order.
Hey, Brent,
yes.
Let me jump in right there, because you'll notice, folks, that the names of the plants are on the individual slides, so you can refer back to while you're watching the recording. You can refer back to the plant and actually see the name. But there is a handout that I dropped into the chat box earlier. I'm getting ready to copy that and drop that again into the chat box to make sure that everybody sees it and gets it. So you can click on that and a Word file will pop up with a list of all the plants that Brent's going to talk about. So sorry, Brent, for interrupting, but I thought I'd jump in there and tell people that.
No problem. And you also reminded me, I did want to make sure that people, when you see the new designation, that indicates that it is a new introduction. And so that way you can kind of tell the new from the ones that have been around for a while. So anyway, starting with begonias, in the big series, we've got a couple of new colors this year. This is the white with green leaf and also the deep rose bronze leaf. These pictures, if you'll notice, are begonias in the sun, and this has actually been a pretty good year for begonias in the sun. It's been hot, but not too hot and not too rainy and that sort of thing. So it's been a really great opportunity to see how some of these things do in full sun. We do have years like 2011 where everything burns up. So anyway, this has been a good summer to see how things are doing with begonias. We've got had a couple of representatives from the Whopper series, rose with green leaf, and then also the Surefire Red Improved from Proven Winners, which has been a good one over the years. We've also had a new series this year from Sakata, the Viking series. I think it was a new introduction last year, but this is the first year I've trialed it. This is Viking with Coral Flame. And Viking XL Red on chocolate. So these are another additions of the large leaf type begonias. And then Benary had a new series this year, the Super Cool, and this is the mix. And I was quite surprised to see how well this one did in full sun. It's a smaller, the smaller leaf fibers type, as opposed to the big leaf like the bigs and the whoppers. So anyway, I thought this was pretty impressive. Then another thing that really surprised me were these new begonias that are double flowered, the Double Up Pink series from Proven Winners that is new this year. This is the pink. We've got white and also red. And I was also quite surprised that these did as well as they have in full sun. You'll also see them later in the container trial, and for which they're pretty good too. And then moving on to coleus. I really enjoy these newer types that have a little bit smaller leaf, and we're starting to get a number of those. I still like the big leaf coleus, of course, don't get me wrong, but this is a really nice addition to the big family of coleus that we're beginning to see that does well in our heat. And this is in the Color Blaze series, the Royal Pineapple Brandy, which is a new addition. The Cherry Brandy holds its color very well during the summer, and then also this is the Royale Apple Brandy, which was also doing well again this summer. In the Flamethrower series, we've got some new colors, the Cajun Spice, which I find to be a particularly rich color in contrast to the green margin. There's a few flowers on this one, but not so many that it's a problem to remove some of those. And if you do, you continue to get the foliage during the season. And then also another color, Sriracha, which is also a nice addition to the series. Some classic favorites here. This is Color Blaze Golden Dreams, which is one of my favorite large leaf types, and I think a good one that I use kind of as a standard from year to year, along with Wicked Witch, which was a new one from last year. Again, it has a few flowers, but not so much that you can't easily remove those, or they don't detract anyway if you can't. And then also a great example from the Main Street series called Ocean Drive from Doom and Orange that has really bright colors, and it holds these colors really nicely in the sun. And in fact, I've noticed when I've had this in the greenhouse earlier in the year, or you know, in the shade or something like that, it just really doesn't have these really vibrant colors. So get it out in the hot sun. This is a great plant. One of our new Texas superstars this year is Kufia, and this is the Mexican heather type Kufias, and this is one called Allison, which is a classic, and I think probably the one that's most widely grown in the industry. There's also some more dwarf types of this Mexican heather type from Benary. This is a Murdo Pink from the Murdo series, which has done well. And then other Kufias that we had, this is the classic Tiny Mice, which we included this year, and it's still a great plant. I mean, I've never grown this and had it fail on me. This is Tiny Mice, and you can see with the close-up here where the name comes from, Bat-Face Kufia is another one, and you can kind of see that as well. So anyway, pretty cool flowers. And then this has become a pretty good classic Kufia for us too, the Vermillionaire from Proven Winners, and it also has proven to be a pretty strong perennial for us most years, unless it gets severely cold. We did something a little bit different with dahlias this year. As you know, they're pretty tough to grow dahlias in Texas, and I've noticed over the years that especially if planted from 4-inch pots a little bit too late in the spring, they just really don't establish themselves as well. So what I tried this year was planting them in 4-inch pots and 6-inch pots, and then we planted them out to see how they do. This, you can see the Venti series. I've got some pictures of the individual varieties in a minute, but these are the ones that were grown from 6-inch pots, and these are the ones that were grown from 4-inch pots. I have a couple of different planting dates, but I wasn't able to include all of that information here. But what was interesting to me is that these 4-inch pots and 6-inch pots were grown from liners that were planted and potted up at the same time. And you can see how much bigger they got in the 6-inch pots just because they were in the bigger pot. And so you get much quicker establishment when you put them out in the garden. So that's something that we're trying to take a look at. And you can see again the Venti series, and then the Mystic Illusion is the one right up here with the darker foliage. Some of the individual varieties, this is a little bit later in the season. The Venti Royal Purple is the one up here in the foreground, and you saw it in the first picture too, the dark purple flowers. We've got Venti Passion Fruit, which has been a good variety for us, and then a Delaya Raspberry, also, which is a new color this year in the Delaya series. This is Dahlia Mystic Illusion, and under the shade it really does get big. This is later in the season. When I grow it out in more sun, it's a little bit more well-mannered, but it's a great big beautiful dahlia, and that's something that's hard to come by in the state of Texas in my book. In fact, it's pushing out the top of the shade. It's so vigorous. There you go, popping flowers through. But anyway, beautiful color of flower and nice contrast with the foliage and everything. And so anyway, it's also, this one has come back for me for a couple of years, as well as, for example, some of the ones from the XXL series that I've trialed over the years also have come back if they're in a happy location. So anyway, but fun working with dahlias. Evolvulus Blue Days is also another new Texas superstar this year. This is the classic Blue Days, which we've had around for a long time, and it's kind of a standard in our industry. We've got some newer varieties. This is Blew My Mind from Proven Winners, which has been a good one. It's got bigger flowers and more flowers than the classic, and also a little bit more compact. And then we've got the new edition this year, which is doing well, is also called Beach Bum Blue from Doom and Orange. And it, as you can see, it's a little bit more compact plant, a little bushier, a little bit smaller leaves. So there's some differences between these varieties as well. Okay, talking about geraniums, another tall order for the heat of our state. This is Mary Helen, which I use as a standard every year. This is a classic pass-along geranium that master gardeners all over the state are in love with, and as well as myself. And so we always try to have some of this around, and you can see that it's doing well in the heat of the summer. And this is in the shade, 30% shade, which is the way I trial geraniums. I do put some out in the full sun just to see what they'll do, but I get a better read if I put them in a little bit of protection like this. given the way that we usually do geraniums in this part of the world. And this is a new, well, actually, this isn't a new color, but this is a newer series, this Mojo Dark Red, which did very well in the heat. And you can see it back here. This is a different one up here, but this one you can see that that's a very, very healthy plant and good flowering even late into the summer, into early August here. And this is what it looks like out in full sun, which is pretty amazing for a geranium in Texas in August. Then we've got also the new Caldera series from Syngenta Flowers. This is in the shade, not quite as bushy as the Mojo, but it's also, you can see that the blood runs a little bit more towards the ivy leaf type. And I have a feeling that these would probably do a better job for you in like a mixed container or containers, because they've got that beautiful ivy leaf, you know, type form and habit. But you can see the healthy color. It doesn't have the chlorotic tips like you can see in a lot of ivy leaf geraniums that won't take the heat in Texas. And this is even it out in full sun. Of course, no deadheading, so you'll have to imagine it when it's beautifully deadheaded by a great gardener. Okay. All right, Gomphrena. We've got a lot of classics in the Gomphrena this year, but it's always a great plant to have in the heat. We have Truffula Pink from Proven Winners, and this is one of the sparkler types, and it's great in the ground both and also in containers. We've got Ping Pong White, which is a little bit bigger one of just a standard type Gomphrena, but not as big as the old pass-along types, but it's a big vigorous plant. This is the white and also the lavender. And then we had the Las Vegas series, and you can see all the colors here. And then this is a plot of the Las Vegas purple, which is also not quite as big as the ping pong, but masses of flowers, and has been a good one for us for a number of years. And of course, Gomphrena is a Texas superstar. Sunflowers have enjoyed, these are not brand new, but we had the Sunfinity. And this one is great, grown from seed, and it continues to flower into August. Now these will start fading out this time of the year, but they do carry a lot of flower power through the summer. And another one is the Sun Credible Yellow. This is a vegetative one, and as you can see, it's got lots of flowers too, very bushy. And I think these are really cool because people really like sunflowers. They're always popular at field day, and so I think these are good, neat new developments in the world of Helianthus. Moving on to Impatiens, a good shade plant. We've got two new series that have come out. The Beacon Rose. This is Beacon series. Rose is on the left, coral's on the right, and these were new introductions this year. And then last year we had the introduction of the Amara series, so it's still pretty new. The Amara XDR. Both of these series report resistance to Impatiens downy mildew. And I have not seen an outbreak. We did plant some susceptible types. I haven't seen an outbreak yet this year. We're going to kind of watch those as we move into the fall. We've got some cooler, wetter weather now, so we may see this start to show up so that we can see the disease resistance also. This is Red Star, and then we've got the Orange Improved. New Guinea Impatiens, we've got a lot of new ones, and I have to say that the New Guinea Impatiens trial this year has kind of reversed me a little bit on, I'm usually talking about how great the ones that are called vigorous are because they're vigorous to our heat and everything, but this year has proved me a little bit wrong on this because a lot of the these newer compact types that are coming out, they're not really small, they're not dwarf or anything, but at the same time they're a little bit more compact than the vigorous, but they still have the heat tolerance. And this is one called Orchid Blush, which I think was a new introduction last year. And then this year we've got the Compact Rose Glow. These are all in the Sun Patience series, which has been a great series for us. The Compact Hot Pink. So you can see how a lot of the newer compact flowers are taking the heat, and these continue to flower through the summer well also, which is a really great thing. We've got, in contrast here, the Vigorous Red on the left and Compact White Improved, so that you can see how well these tried and true colors are doing. And then this is the Vigorous Lavender Splash, a new one in the vigorous category. You can see it's just a bigger, beefier plant. And one thing about these is they are bigger, so you can plant them further apart, so you don't need as many plants to fill up that space in the shade. And so anyway, pretty cool stuff. Also, we had some new colors in the Infinity series, and these are more compact, and they do well. Maybe don't flower quite as heavily during the summer, but I also think that these are probably going to do better as container plants, and because New Guineas do well as container plants, and this has got a little bit more compact form, and is going to do well there. This is the orange improved. Moving on to Ipomoea, one of our most heat-tolerant plants. This is Sweet Carolyn Kiwi, and I wanted to show this one first because we've moved towards these more finely dissected leaf types. And I've been impressed that we have some that now, like this one, that they hold up in the sun without bleaching, despite the fact that they've got that dissected leaf. And then here we go this year with a new one called Medusa that has a very fine leaf, and I kind of expected to see some burning on this one, but it's held up very well. And I do like the contrast between the new foliage, the darker color of the new foliage, and the green the chartreuse green that serves as a background that they basically fade to after the new leaves have come out. And then a couple of classics. This is from the Floramia series. Lyman Wedge has done well. It develops a nice edge in the sun and the heat like this. So that's kind of an added bonus. I think that's a nice blush to have on a chartreuse green background like this. And then Floramia Cameo, very pretty, maintains its color pretty well during the summer. And also, it's really funny, I rarely get deer feeding in my trials in the field, in my annual trials. In this particular location, but every once in a while later in the summer, the deer find the ornamental sweet potatoes, and they love them, and they do eat the purple ones first. So, but they don't stop there. Of course, they grow right back out of it, which is also kind of amazing. Another heat lover, Lantana New Gold, one of our classic Texas superstars and a bread and butter plant for decades in the Texas industry. I like including this one as a standard, and it didn't disappoint. This year, we've also got some new ones in the Luscious series, the Royal Red Zone. Nice colors. This is a big beefy plant, this particular series, though this Royal part of the series is a little bit more compact than the regular part of the Luscious series. And then this is another one of those, the Royal Cosmo, which we had last year as well, that did nicely. And then from Syngenta Flowers, we've got Hot Blooded Red. We've trialed this one for a couple of years now, and it's got that nice uniform habit that's kind of reminiscent of the Bandana series, but this is a little bit bigger plant, I think, with really nice colors. And then the Avita series has done well from Benary, and this is one of their new experimentals, experimental orange. And so that usually means that we've got more things coming down the pipeline, and I'm looking forward to that because this has been a good series as well. Then the Havana series has been out for a couple of years now, and this Havana Sunrise is still one of the best colors, I think, in the series, and has done really well for us. I love the combination of the colors and the flowers on this one.
Hey, Brent, this is James. I don't know if Charlie's had to drop out for a second. Keith had a question. How long will you leave the Mara and Beacon in the ground?
I will continue to leave those in the ground into probably into October. We'll kind of see how it goes and how the weather goes. We're going to be taking our last data this next month, but I'll be this month, but I'm going to be watching those. And especially recently, we've had lots of rain and we've had a little bit cooler temperatures. So I'm kind of thinking that if we're going to see some of that powdery downy mildew show up, hopefully we'll see it then. So I'm kind of we'll take a wait and look on that, but I'll carry it on for a few more weeks now.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, moving on to marigolds. We had a few marigolds this year, and one thing that I had tried last year that was really heat tolerant was the Coco series. This series, and you can see how tall they are. it's really a cut flower type, but they've got the vigor, they've got the heat tolerance. So what we tried this year was doing more pinching so that we would get a bushier plant. And even that, they do get very tall and everything. But if especially if you're a cut flower grower out there, this would be an awesome plant to grow for cut flowers here in the heat. But even if you're not, if you just are continuously pinching off old flowers, you can get a big bushy plant. But I've been very impressed with the heat tolerance of this particular series. There's 3 colors. We also had some new introductions in the Marvel 2 series. This is the yellow, which is kind of being overgrown by its neighbors. I apologize for that, but it hung in there quite well, and it's much more compact and a little bit smaller flowers, but this is a really good heat tolerant marigold. And then we also had some new tri-specific triploid experimentals from Syngenta flowers, which look pretty good. Had a yellow and orange, and so these are holding up also very well in the heat. So I've been pretty impressed with the marigolds we had this year, even though the choices were limited. But it looks like some of these are interspecific hybrids, which are really impressing me to getting the different types of flowers that we have that have more heat tolerance. A couple of miscellaneous items that we had this year. Again, I like this Basil Everleaf Emerald Towers. And as you can see, it really does have an upright growth habit, and it impresses me that it has very little flowering, even into late summer. And so anyway, very nice from a culinary sense, and very nice for smaller gardens as far as not spreading out, and you get something tall. Also, another classic is the Cleome Cinerita Rosalita. And this one never disappoints. It's very tough in the heat. It doesn't get the lower yellow leaves, and also is relatively thornless. In Gaillardia, the heated up series, this is the scarlet and this is the yellow. You can see all the flowers that have been on these things. They hang in there really well during the summer. They are not perennial for us, but we do get good flowering with them over the summer. A couple of things that we've also been playing with are these different colors of porterweed. And this is a dwarf purple that I got from my colleagues at LSU at the Hammond Center. And anyway, this one has been really nice. I mean, it's the same color as the traditional purple porterweed, but it has a more a dwarf habit and a little bit more rugose leaf. And I think this is going to be one that might be nice for growing in containers also. For production, from a production standpoint. And then we have the dwarf red, which is also very nice. This one I think is going to also be a lot more amenable to production. So anyway, hoping to do a little bit more with those so that we can see those in the future. Moving on to pentas, this is a new color in the Glitterati series. You can see kind of the star type flower called Red Star that did very well for us this year. And we also had some different colors from the Graffiti 2020 series, an introduction last year, I believe, from Benary. This is the ultraviolet. And we also have the 2020 white. I think this is a really great white, compact type white pentas. It has more vigor than the old Graffiti series did in the white anyway. And so anyway, this has been a big improvement, I think. Also had the Graffiti OG mix, and that does not include this down here. This is the Glitterati I was talking about earlier, but these are the OG mix, which also performed quite well for us, that particular series. And we had the Kaleidoscope mix, which is kind of a classic pentas series that folks grow. One that
Hey Brent, let me jump in there.
Mm-hmm.
We had a question come in. What genera is porterweed?
Porterweed, oh wow, I'll have to look that one up. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Staphytarpida or something like that. Maybe somebody can look that up and put it in the chat box. But anyway, it's a cool plant. Okay, this is another pentas called Northern Lights. It's been around for a long time, and this one does well for us year in and year out. I consider it kind of a standard. It's not as heavy flowering as some of the other ones, but it always is a big beefy plant and has lots of flowers, and of course attracts all the pollinators and everything like pentas do. So that's we had a nice complement of pentas this year. We did a couple of new peppers. I grow them. I basically grow all the peppers as ornamentals, and these didn't disappoint. They're beautiful plants. This is one called Pepe Grande, and it's more of a sweet. It's a bell type, but it's not as big of a fruit. And if it's grown isolated from other peppers, it's supposed to be seedless, and so it's easier to process and supposed to have nice flavor and be sweet. So. Anyway, very pretty pepper, very pretty plant. And then this pepper, Armageddon, is probably very well named. I have not tried to eat this. I don't do hot peppers. But I did read that this measures in it's with a Scoville unit of 1.3 million, which compares to the notorious Carolina Reaper, which has 1.5 million in Scoville units as far as heat. And so anyway, if you love hot peppers, there you go. And if you aren't sure, you have been warned before you bite into these things. So anyway, but it's a pretty plant and a beautiful pepper. Portulaca is another one of our new Texas superstars, and this is there's these two-tone ones that are out now that I really like. This one's called Orange Touch, and then this one's called Magenta Touch. And these are from the upright part of the cupcake series. And anyway, these do really well for us, and I like these new colors that are on the market now. Have a new Rudbeckia this year too. This is called Cheyenne Gold. It's reminiscent of Prairie Sun, but this one is a little bit more compact. I think it's got bigger flowers. It flowers a little bit earlier. This one doesn't flower as early as some of the smaller flowering types like Toto or some of those, but it lasts much later into the summer. We've still got flowers on these into early August. And of course, a lot of these Rudbeckias do tend to burn up by the end of our season anyway, but this one does go with the flowers through most of the summer. And so that's been a fun thing. This is a great new addition to the Rudbeckias out there. And then Rudbeckia Goldstrom was also included in the trial this year. And of course, it is a good perennial for us. I grew it out in the annuals, and I think I'm going to transplant some of these into the garden. I was very impressed with the fact that this is a seed strain of Goldstrom. And in fact, I have that misspelled. That's S-T-U-R-M. Sorry about that. But anyway, was really impressed that this seed strain is very compact and very uniform in flowering, and it flowers in midsummer. So you've got flowers later into the season, and these plants do persist. It's a good perennial for us here.
Hey, Brent, got another question from Tim. Often we want what we can't have. Genetically, what makes it difficult to get lantana flowers in solid colors?
That would be a good question for the breeders. I can't answer that.
Okay.
But anyway, that is a good question. I mean, I think New Gold is probably one of the best we have that's in a solid color. But you're right. I hadn't really thought about it, but a lot of the other ones do have the multiple colors in it. So. Okay, moving on with salvias, we've got a new one here called White Flame, which is it's a Farinaceae type, but it looks like one on steroids. And the thing that's impressed me about this salvia is that it is the cleanest white Farinaceae type salvia I've ever grown. It comes on very early in the season, which you see here, and then later in the season you can see the flowers. If you look back here, you can see that eventually the whole raceme ages, but the individual flowers fall off instead of turning brown and staying on the plant. So you get a nice clean look with this. Of course, later in the season, like I mentioned, some of the racemes do go ahead and brown out, which you could remove those if you wanted to clean it up a little bit. But there's so many new ones that do have, like down here, that have the clean white look on them, that it does maintain that clean look. So anyway, this is a pretty cool development in the world of Salvia farinaceae, I think. And then we had the Rockin' series. We had Blue Suede Shoes. We also had Black and Bloom. These are kind of standards for us. I grew them out here in the annuals for some comparisons. And then Amistad, which is actually a good perennial for us too. The one thing about all these big salvias that I've learned over the last couple of years, though, is that it's best to get them in the ground early, because they will get well established before the heat, and then you get a much better summer show. out of these things. If you plant them way too late, like up into early June or something like that, they don't really have a chance to get their feet in the ground, and you won't get nearly as nice a show. We had some Scaevola in the trials, and as usual, the blue ones are the best still. Whirlwind Blue improved here. We had the Abanico series, this is blue, and we also had Laguna Blue. But again, some of the pinks that we had didn't do that well. The blue ones rule the day, and then this is Purple Bird. That's also a good one. So anyway, still headed in the right direction, but some more good breeding could be done with Scaevola. And then with petunias, the only petunia we've had some of the usual fellows, but I had to kind of limit myself here. This is, I think, one of the best new ones that we had in the trial. It's the Supertunia Royal Velvet, and this one hung in there with Tidal Wave Silver and some of those as far as flowering into late summer and taking the heat. So anyway, good improvement on this particular variety from proven winners.
Hey, Brent, I got sidetracked by looking at the pretty pictures, and I forgot to check the chat box, but Blair was asking, was the Goldstrom overwintered, vernalized, or planted in the spring?
No, that was planted in the spring, so that is first year blooming from seed.
Okay.
Yeah. Then Vinca, we had the Cora series. We had lots of the XDR colors. This is light pink. Of course, they have the disease resistance to aerial Phytophthora and are a Texas superstar. This is the light pink, and then this is one called Hot Genta. We also had a new color in the Cora Cascade, which I think is really awesome, and it's bright rose. And this is what you can do with those Cora Cascades. I really like these things. They will spill. I've seen them spilling over rock walls and that sort of thing, and they're just really pretty awesome plants. Also, we had the Valiant series, which also has some resistance to aerial Phytophthora, and this is the lilac, and then this is a new color, apricot improved, which did quite nicely, and this is what you can do with that in the garden. Very cool plant, very nice color. It blends with a lot of different things. Continuing to grow is the series, the Soiree series, Soiree Kawaii. And these are some of the colors. The Blueberry Kiss in the center is the new color, and then we had red shades and coral from left to right there that we've had in the series before. We also have a new one called Coral Reef, which, as you can see, is more compact, so it's a little bit more with the series. Though I love the old coral one because it is pretty vigorous, and I love the color on that one. But this is a nice new introduction, and I think will be great in containers, as I think all of these are. And then here's the white peppermint, which is also a color that's been out in that series before. And then zinnias, we had some pretty beautiful zinnias this year. This is a yellow improved, a new one, improvement in the Zahara series, and you can see how well it's doing. We also had some of the other colors, the double cherry. I'm very impressed that we've gotten the breeding to the point that this doesn't fade white in our heat. So that's a pretty cool thing. This is the double salmon, which does have a tendency to splay a little bit, but it maintains its color late into the season, which is this picture. And you can see it splayed a little bit in the center, but it does grow back and fill in. But that's a characteristic that's also continuously improving with the breeding, and that's a great thing. And then the double bright orange. Then we also had, this is an overview, and you can see how colorful that's been all summer, the zinnias. We had a series that was introduced last year by American Taki. This first year I've grown it from the Preciosa series. This one, they tout it as being more compact, better branched, and more double than their Dream series. And I have to say that I'm quite impressed with this. And also, we planted these very late in the season, and it was early June when we planted these. And so we avoided some of the leaf spot diseases that sometimes you can get with these elegance type zinnias. And so anyway, I just wanted to show you some of the colors, the rose, the white, the pink, yellow, scarlet, and this is their tropical blend, which I think is very nice as well. So anyway, a great new series, and also good for the fall, in fact. Okay, let's move on to container trials, and this is in the shade. I mentioned earlier the begonias. This is the double up series. We've got pink, white, and red, which are new, and these are, as you can see, beautiful in containers. I guess I could have put these in full sun in the containers, like I did in the field, but I went ahead and put them in the shade trial this year. Also in begonias, we had the new Boliviensis type Groovy series from Benary. This is the white, and also the rose. And these do really pretty well for us. So if you want to look like this from begonias in containers on patios in the shade in the summer, I mean, this is a good choice. The only caveat I will give for this and any of the tuberous type begonias that you try to grow in Texas is they just can't stay too wet. If they get too wet, you run the risk of them rotting off on you, and that's kind of a delicate balancing act. So that's a little bit of a restriction on these, but they really are nice. And speaking of the tuberous types, that some that have actually done pretty well, which kind of blows me away that you can still have a tuberous begonia alive in August in Texas. But this is the Double Delight Blush Rose. That's a very pretty one. And then also a couple of experimentals in the Joy, I believe this is Joy Nonstop. I should have gotten all of that in there. Sorry about that. But this is an experimental red, and then we've got an experimental orange as well. And so these have been very impressive too. The Joy part of that series I think is a little bit more vigorous or whatever, and performs better for us. So anyway, that's pretty cool. Out in the sun, moving on to Bracteantha. This is a new one called Grandvia Gold, which was absolutely stunning. It does melt if I put it in partial shade later in the summer. This is a plant that likes lower humidities and stuff like that. So if you end up getting a lot of rain like we're getting recently, that can be an issue with it. But I would think in the drier parts of the state, more arid parts of the state, this is going to be particularly nice. We had some new colors in Calibrachoas. You see the bloom-tastics over here, which are good and continue to bloom during the summer. We had some new colors in in fact, I think this is a whole new series, this Cha-Cha Diva series. We've got the Hot Pink and Frosty Lemon, and then also a new color in the Super Bell series over here, the Coral Sun, which is a very nice color. Delosperma, I've seen some of these come out over the last couple of years, and this is kind of a cool, really dwarf one from Must Have Perennials. And I think these are best in containers because you can get them up off the ground where they have a tendency to rot on us very quickly. Again, probably better in more arid parts of the state. Also leftover from some fall stuff that we did is this new euphorbia called Miner's Merlot. This is the foliage that you get in the winter. And then these are the flowers that you get in the spring. And we've had these plants continue on through the summer. They seem to be fairly heat tolerant. So I'm going to carry them through another year to see how they do. They do seem to hold up better in containers than they do in the ground. But I've had a few survive in the ground. So anyway, still kind of playing around with this. But this type of winter blooming euphorbia is also one of our Texas superstars, and this one would fit that category. Heucheras, I have found to do much better in containers than in the ground for me. This is one called Steel City. Nice green with purple reverse. And then lavenders, we've had a few new lavenders to try, and I've gotten to where I have the best luck doing lavenders in clay pots. This is Goodwin Creek, kind of a really good heat tolerant lavender for us that I use as a standard. We also had a relatively new one called Big Boy James that does really well, but I haven't gotten this one to flower yet. So I'm not sure if I just not get enough cold temperatures or whatever. I'm going to continue with these through the winter to see how they do, and we'll see what kind of flowering we get next spring. This is a new one called Primavera from Darwin Perennials, and we did get some flowering on this one in the spring. So this is a bloom first year from seed type lavender, and it's a very nice compact Spanish type lavender that's doing well. And then we've got one called Papillon from Benary too. And again, I'll be hoping to see how the flowering goes when we look at these next spring. In the petunias, we had, I think one of the standouts in the containers was this Petunia Bee's Knees. This is a really great yellow petunia, and it's a little bit heat sensitive later in the summer, but I think is much better in containers, and that's where it should be. And so probably a little bit of late afternoon sun protection would be good for this one, but talk about a beautiful show on that. Also, new Telotus. This one is much more well branched than the one that was on the market before, and we got a good bushy look at this. Now, this species isn't going to go all summer for us. It's probably going to do better also in a more arid type environment. But I've also, if you're thinking about containers, I think there's still a question out there about exactly what consumers expect containers as far as longevity goes through the season. And so this is something that would fit more of a late spring, summer type rotation as far as containers go. A couple of nice Salvia farinaceae that look great in containers is the Evolution Violet and Fairy Queen. These are good classic Salvia farinaceae, and they don't disappoint in the containers. And then also Unplugged So Blue is a good one. Of course, these salvias are perennial for us, but this one has a nice, really big racemes on it that I think are particularly nice. And then a new Salvia canariensis type. This is one called Lancelot, and it did really well for us. But again, this one's going to like more arid and a more arid climate. I think it's much better in containers. I've tried it in the ground before, and it's not real happy with that. But it's really, really cool, and you can see the flowers here that are a bonus. But the foliage is also a really beautiful, beautiful thing. So. Do the Vinca Tattoo series as recommended in containers, and this raspberry I thought was one of the best colors. I think this one holds its tattoo color the best through the heat and into the sun. Sometimes in some of these they tend to fade a little bit, but this one I think holds its colors really well and doesn't fade off in the sun either. So love this color in that particular series. Okay, moving in, I had a few perennials that I wanted to talk about. We've expanded our perennial plantings in the last years, and we're starting to see the results from that. Of course, it takes a couple of years. This is the second year on this Achillea, and it established itself very well. I'm not sure this is going to be a real long-lived, and it probably needs to be out away from some of these other things to get more sun. But this one has a nice shape, nice form, and it doesn't seem to runner like some of these Achilleas can do. We've had this colocasia in the garden for a number of years, and it came in as a different name, and we finally figured out with the Abbott Ipco folks that this is Diamond Head. This thing's come back for about 3 years for us now, and it is just really spectacular and has that beautiful purple foliage that goes with so many different kinds of flowers.
Hey, Brent, did you notice any splitting on that?
Splitting? Oh, on the leaves?
Yeah.
On these? No, but this particular planting is located
Achillea
with some other large things around it, so it has protection. Sometimes if it's out in a more open area where you've got a lot of wind, you can get a little bit of tearing and stuff that way. But anyway,
no, that question was regarding the Achillea.
Oh, the Achillea. So ask me the question again.
Did you notice any splitting on that?
Oh, as far as the clump falling apart? I guess is what they're talking about. And that's the one thing that I really like about that particular Achillea is that it didn't do that.
Okay.
So that was a plus on that one. Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. Okay, and then with Mike Arnold got some Dianellas and Lamandras that we can take a look at for the Texas Superstar program, and my favorite so far has been this Dianella Blutopia. This is we just planted it this year, but that's a pretty nice show for the first year. I love the broad leaves, so we'll see how it goes through the winter. And I haven't seen the flowers on it yet, but it's supposed to have some nice flowers to show. So we'll see how that goes this next year. Good survival on this Dianthus, Mountain Frost Red Garnet. These small type perennial Dianthus like this have a tendency to melt away on us, but this one has held up well. This is a little bit of a raised bed, and it's got good drainage, so those things are a necessity, of course. But this one came through looking good so far. On the Echinacea, I have done some of these before, and they're a lot of fun. Planted in the spring, they're spectacular, even in the first year of blooming. But we got these last fall, and I love planting stuff like this in the fall. You can plant them green. I also like doing Rudbeckia this way, but you plant these in the fall, like in October, early November, and then you get a really good established plant. And this is when they started blooming back in late May, and then all the way through into July, we've got this beautiful display of flowers. And so anyway, Summerina Blazing Fire, and it put on quite a show this summer. They do have a tendency to melt away in late summer, but they put on such a long show that that they're definitely worth the space. So, okay, looking at echinaceas, this is kind of a classic echinacea that we've had. I got this seed strain from one of my master gardeners, Jack Quisenberry, and this one has, it self-sows, the plants come back for 2 or 3 years, and it's just really an awesome echinacea, very traditional colors and everything, but one that really takes our climate. A lot of echinaceas just don't make it, especially some of the more recent hybrids. So anyway, this one is one that I like having as a standard to kind of compare things to. Of course, it loves the pollinators, as the pollinators love it, I guess I should say, as they love echinaceas. And then let's move on to some of the newer things. This is the Sombrero series, which has just done phenomenally well for us. It really stole the show late spring and early summer this past year, and also into midsummer, really maintaining its color. This is the second year. During the first year, they're not going to be as big and showy, but they do have flowers. And so this is a very cool series, and they do better if they're in full sun with good air movement and everything. I didn't get as good a survival when I planted these where they get some shade. So anyway, just an awesome new echinacea series for us. This is a couple of the colors: Tres Amigos, Flamingo Orange. Really cool, bright, and I love bright colors anyway, so what's not to love about this, right? Now, these are some of the new echinaceas that we just planted this year, and you can see during the first year they don't put on as big a show, but you do get some nice color. And we've got the Artisan series, and these are from seed, whereas the other ones, the sombreros are tissue culture, I believe. And but we've got a couple from the Artisan series, and also a new one called Lovely Lolly, which is a very double one. And then up at the top, the Apex Mix series. And you can see this is part of the Apex Mix, all of these colors up here. So pretty cool. You can see how they're bulking up. Artisan, this is the red ombre, and so it's going to be really interesting to see how these do next spring. Really pretty Gara. This one has held up very well. Not a lot of aphids on this one. So I don't know if I didn't have other Garas, so I don't know if it was just a low aphid year or if this one's actually kind of tolerant of the aphids. But anyway, have had good flowering on this one all summer. And with the variegated foliage, it's just a really interesting plant, I think. We've also had a couple, I've done these Sweet Series Gerberas for several years, and from the Fiesta series. And I'm sorry, from the Sweet series, this is Fiesta. And then we've also got Sweet Memories. And these two particular colors in that series have done really well and continue to give us some flowers in the summer. Some of them go out of flower in the summer and they'll come back in the fall, but these have done really well and become well established. This was a little bit of a surprise for me, the Helenium Salute Golden. I had about 3 colors in this one, but this particular one has survived for a couple of years now, and it just put on a spectacular show this year. So this picture was taken just recently, and anyway, that's pretty cool. Big long stalks. And then we've got from Jay Berry, this is the Summer Spice series. This is one called Amaretto, which I think is a really good one. Of all the ones that I've trialed from this series, this is one of the best. And this was bred by one of our own Texas A&M breeders, Darius Melanowski, out at the Vernon Center. And I think this one has a lot of attributes going for it, as well as the huge flowers and a beautiful color. We've got some iris. These are reputedly reblooming, and I haven't seen a lot of reblooming from these yet, but we're just getting them established. This is Halloween Halo, close up of the flowers. This one does really well in flowers very heavily. And then we've also got Pleasant Peasant, which was one of the more outstanding ones in that group. And so we'll continue to watch those for reblooming. We've got in Leucanthemum, this is a new one called Madonna, and this is in its second year. So we had good flowering from that. I always lose a few. In Leucanthemum, we always tend to lose a plant or two, but these, if you kind of regroup them in the fall, they'll put on a beautiful show like this. And this is a very compact one. It stands up very well to the weather, and so I think is something very cool and probably also nice in containers. It has a very long blooming period. These lilies are something that I've been wanting to try for a long time, and we're into our second year with these. And of course, these are lilies take at least a couple of years to get their feet in the ground. So I'm really anxious to see what they're going to look like next year. This American series, this is one called Warrior. We've got one called Hot Chocolate, which blooms a little bit later. The Warrior bloomed earlier. And then this is one called American Native that I've had in my yard for a number of years. And I got this at a garden show down in Galveston a number of years ago, and this is all from one bulb, and it just keeps making a clump bigger and bigger and bigger. And these things are up like 4+ feet tall and bloom for a number of weeks in late spring and early summer, and they are just absolutely spectacular. So, if you think you can't grow lilies here, this is one that you need to try to grow. They're awesome. Nepeta, this is one called Whisper Pink, and this is, I'm sorry I missed the flowering period on this one, but you can still see flowers, and even late in the season, we're getting good foliage. A lot of times Nepeta can melt away on us, but this one is still looking good and outgrowing the weeds even. Okay, a few things about phlox. This is one called Mini Pearl, which is more of a spring type phlox. I think they think it's a selection of Carolina, Phlox Carolina, and found on a roadside in Mississippi. It's a very cool plant and blooms very early in April, starts in April, and then for a number of weeks it has a really beautiful floral display. We've also been getting some interesting new garden phlox from Darwin Perennials. This is the new ones. This year was Super Kapow. We had some of the Kapows the last couple of years, and the Super Kapows, we just planted these, so they're actually looking pretty good for the first year, and I'm anxious to see what they're going to do next spring. This is the lavender, a little bit past the main blooming period, but even as you can see, these are blooming very late into the summer for a garden phlox, which is impressing me. This is from the ones from last year, the Kapow. This is their second season. And again, I'm sorry I missed the blooming period on these because they were just spectacular. You can see where all the old blooms were, and you can see the secondary bloom coming. They probably would have even been better if we'd had time to go out and deadhead. So anyway, pretty cool stuff. Kapow lavender. And then Ruellia, this is one called Machu Morado, and I'm very impressed with this so far. We'll see how it goes through the winter, and usually these large types run real bad. In fact, I've got one that I'm still 10 years later trying to get out of my garden. Anyway, we'll kind of see what this one does. It hasn't shown any signs of that yet, so maybe it's a little bit more controlled. A salvia that we have really grown to like, and we're starting to look at this in the Texas Superstar program, is Salvia darcii. It's a very cool plant, very tough, takes all kinds of different conditions. You get some flowering in the spring. It'll go a little bit out of flowering in the summer and then pick up again in the fall, and it's a real hummingbird magnet. So it's a really awesome plant. There's a close-up of the flowers. And then some Salvia nemorosa types. I've been doing a lot of these, and I hope to have more of a report on those as we go into the next season. We've just kind of gotten those established this year, but the Salvia Blue Bayou is the one that started my interest in this, that we got a couple of years ago. And this thing is really awesome. It blooms very heavily in the spring and pretty much during the summer. A little bit of deadheading goes a long way with this plant, and then in the fall it gives another spectacular show. So anyway, just a very cool plant, and I think a big improvement over some of the nemorosas that are out there that we've had in the past. We've also got Salvia Big Blue, and I showed you the unplugged So Blue on the right there in containers. These came back for me, and we had a little bit of a question on hardiness of Big Blue, which is grown from seed and looks and is somewhat similar to Mystic Spire's Blue, except it's more upright and has a little bit darker flower, I think. And but it's very cool, and so I was happy to see these come back. And of course, all of these types of salvias have a really cool attraction for the pollinators. And you can see all the bumblebees here going after it. It's pretty amazing that way. So, all right. And then last but not least, we've got another salvia called Salvia uliginosa, or Bog Sage. And I have just been really impressed with this. It has continued to make a little bit bigger clump every year and has these beautiful sky blue flowers. and is very, very at home in lots of different situations. I have heard that if you're in a really wet situation, that it has a tendency to spread aggressively, but I have not had that issue. And Mike Arnold mentioned to me the other day that it hasn't been a big issue down in College Station either. Of course, we haven't planted in like a real boggy type situation where it might do something like that. So anyway, but a very, very cool plant actually, and a good strong perennial. So, and with that, I want you to know that tiger swallowtail was posing for me. I did not stage that. And so anyway, that's been, we've seen a lot of these this summer. And the pentas are, of course, a place that they love to hover. So anyway, all right, that's it. Are there any more questions that have popped up?
There's a couple, but I'm just amazed at how you just have this sixth sense of when it's right on time, and now you cover that many plants in the time period. That's simply amazing. But the first of the remaining questions is, are the phlox kapow more dwarf?
I think, well, in general, yes. Like if you're comparing them to John Fanick, these are all, very dwarf, because, even the kapows that I've had in their second year, they were up about maybe 14, 16 inches in full flower, whereas of course, as you know, John Fanick will be more like 36 inches. So yes, they are more dwarf, and typically I haven't seen good dwarf garden phlox that do well in our climate, but these are hanging in there, and so that's what's kind of piqued my interest about these.
Okay, and then the last question, it was over in the Q&A box, and I wasn't monitoring it that closely, so sorry, Debbie, that I missed that. But she asked a question that I think you can answer retroactively, Brent, is that were there any plants that stood out as being bee magnets? Now, I know you talked about these, or as you mentioned several plants as you went in terms of being really attractive to bees, but maybe your top two or three right off the top of your head in terms of bee magnets.
Well, off the top of my head would be the salvias, the Mystic Spires blue, the big blue, the unplugged so blue, those types of salvias. They love those blue flowers. And then also I'd have to say the Cuphea vermillionaire is probably another one that's way up there. Sometimes you can just see it almost pulsing with pollinators in the middle of the summer. And then also the echinaceas, they have a tendency to pull in probably more butterflies and stuff than bees, but you do see the bees on them as well.
Yeah. Awesome. We answered a bunch of questions during the webinar itself through the chat box. I appreciate folks doing all that in terms of typing in those questions. Brent, thank you so much for the information. This has been amazing once again. And your knowledge is incredible regarding all of these plants. I've already tagged on my sheet the ones that I want in my own home landscape. So that's always an interesting twist for me. Thanks again, James, for TNLA's sponsorship of the ongoing webinar series. And again, thanks folks for being here. There's a whole lot of thank yous coming in the chat box, Brent, for you and everything. So I'll share those chats with you a little bit later. But thanks again, everybody, for being here. Be on the lookout for the recording. You'll get a 24-hour email with the recording link, and that'll take you to the Ellison Share website. And also you can go to the link that's on Brent's handout, and you can see the presentation there as well. All right. Thanks again, Brent. Great job as usual. Take care,
Thank you, Charlie.
folks.
Appreciate the opportunity.